Okay. Hi, I'm Laura Fry, Senior Curator and Curator of Art at Gilcrease Museum. And today I'm speaking with Tulsa weatherman Travis Meyer, who you may know for interrupting your television feed with numerous severe storm warnings over the years. Travis, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It is great to be here. So this is kind of a first for me, and I look forward to what we're going to be doing here for the next half hour.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we'll be taking a look at several artworks from the Gilcrease collection that feature really spectacular cloudscapes or incoming storms. And we'll really be considering how meteorology has influenced artists over the last couple hundred years. But first, Travis, I wanted to ask, as a meteorologist, what do you think of when you look at landscape paintings and artistic interpretations of weather? And does it ever bug you when artists really get it wrong?
That's a tough question because I've always looked for artwork that is associated with weather. I love it. And a lot of times I'm really into the storms and kind of the peaceful look with big thunderstorms coming up on the horizon or whatever. And so I have spent a lot of time looking at that type of artwork. And because of that, yes, occasionally I'll see something, I'll go, oh my, who came up with that? But again, I always remember it's the artist, interpretation of what's going on. So I try to keep that away from the science nerd side of me and just appreciate it for the value of what it is. But it has been a very interesting, I would say the last 25 to 30 years, I've spent a little bit more time. And of course, with Gilcrease being what it is, it's just like my neighbor next door. And so it's so nice to be able to go there. But I'm really more interested in how it's highlighted, I would say. And maybe as we talk about this, as we go forward, I'll put in my 2 cents worth on what I see and what I think from a meteorological standpoint and how that is maybe interpreted differently. So we'll find out here in a little bit.
Sounds great. Well, I wanted to start by taking a look at an early object from the Gilcrease collection. We're going to take a look at a map that was published in Amsterdam in 1666. This is titled A New and Accurate Map of the World by Peter Goose. And it shows kind of this depiction of the globe, but it's surrounded by this very fanciful take on the sun and the winds, the cloud bursts. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this representation of weather and atmosphere.
Well, this is really, I had to look at it in great detail, and I'm going to go back in history just for some folks. I'm sure just about everybody knows Aristotle, but that was, I think, 300, 350 BC. And Aristotle wrote one of the first, bigger papers, if I can use the word paper, on meteorology. And then, like, for an extended period of time, like until about the 1600s, there wasn't a whole lot of additional things going on. So I don't want to say he wrote the book on it, but it was very interesting, the interpretation of what was going on at that time and how it didn't really change for basically almost probably 2,000 years. He was excessively intelligent. And so a lot of people took his work and then worked off of that a little bit, but nobody really said much. And so when you look at this artwork or this piece, I was real interested in, of course, the 4 corners with the 4 faces. And those 4 faces of what they represent, it looks like the winds from the 4 directions. And then at the very top, I was looking at how the sun was kind of split down the middle. And then I noticed the rainbows arcing, or the rainbow arcing from to the left and to the right. And the colors that were used in that were interesting. There weren't normal rainbow colors. There were 5 instead of 7. And then I was looking at the birds flying in, and then the artist made, again, billowy clouds, which we usually associate with what we call cumulus clouds, and they're kind of all over the place. And then on the right side, just below the sun, you see a kind of a quarter moon. And so there's a couple of interesting parts to that. And I really felt that it was pretty well done for the time period. I was looking at it from a perspective of like, how would I see things if I didn't know anything about meteorology? And how would I anything with weather? But I found it very interesting that it incorporated the 4 corners with the, I don't know what those are. Those, Laura, would you call those baby faces, or what would you call those?
Cherubs, maybe,
Cherubs.
Or just maybe anthropomorphized natural elements. Yeah. Yeah. these sort of cherub faces representing the winds coming from the four directions. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I look at that, I was like, that's interesting because, sailors had to understand a lot of things during those times. And so there was a lot of intense weather thought in that. But I thought it was very interesting to just look at how he put all this together and then looking at the kind of the darkness on the right side compared to the light on the left side, or at least to me, I saw that. And the way he put together the rainbow, I thought was very interesting. I couldn't quite understand what he was trying to do because as I visualize the rainbow today, as we go outside and look at it, I don't see it that way. So I was wondering how that was taken into perspective and what he's trying to explain on that.
Certainly, there might be some symbolism going on that we're not quite aware of, from this day and age. But
yeah,
I thought it's a really interesting place to start. And it seems like it wasn't really until the early 19th century that some of our current definition of clouds started to come into use. And this, I think, certainly started to influence landscape painters. And one of the next works I'd like to take a look at is this painting by Alfred Jacob Miller showing Chain Lake in the Rocky Mountains from 1840. And it shows really a storm coming across a lake. But I was wondering, what can this painting by Miller tell us about the weather in the Rocky Mountains or in a mountainous landscape?
This one I really, really like. And because it gives you such a what should we say, kind of the uniqueness of watching the storm, watching it, coming across. And it gives me a feeling like there's so much power. And I think he grabbed it very well because as you look at kind of piling over the mountaintop. And if you've ever been to the Rockies during that time period, when there's thunderstorms, which is a daily occurrence in the summer. So it's kind of like, that's a lot of people who've ever gone to the Rockies understand that almost every afternoon there's some thunderstorms blowing up. But I thought that the way that he grabbed that image, and probably one of the biggest things that I would say, Laura, is that, for someone to take an image and have it in their mind, especially when they don't, I'm so used to like getting a snapshot or something or painting off of something else, but for them to grab that image and to see that in their mind and to make such great detail on that thunderstorm, and then the foreground of the peace and tranquility that usually precedes a thunderstorm. I was very impressed by how that picture just really tells a great story. And there's nothing in this artwork that I saw that looks out of place. It looks very much so realistic that, I feel like I'm there almost.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Alfred Jacob Miller's depictions of weather are very subtle and really beautiful. But as we continue through the 19th century, I'd like to take a look at one of our paintings by Albert Bierstadt, Sierra Nevada Morning from 1870. And this is a case where Bierstadt isn't simply trying to create a really powerful emotional image of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. He's also really conveying some symbolic meanings, especially through this depiction of sky. And I was wondering too, this is such a kind of extreme example, but can you make any weather predictions based on these really dramatic clouds by Albert Bierstadt? Or how does he seem to be manipulating the weather to kind of up the drama in this image?
Well, it's kind of to me an image that gives you a better feeling of like, to me, the power and what can happen in an actual thunderstorm. And again, I rely a lot on what I'm talking about in terms of, I love the power of storms and I love the peace and tranquility that, is in some areas in place of it. But everything that he built on this and painted was seemingly just very, very well done. There's almost nothing in here that makes me look at it other than I love how the light is shining. I love how he reflects off of that. And for many people, and I know majority of people probably know this, but a cloud is really a bluish gray. It's not white. And the only way we see it white is when there's sunlight reflecting off of that, because that sunlight reflecting off of the water droplets gives off a white hue, generally speaking. And so, and so he really captures that, by how he's done that. And people, if you really look at a cloud, and if you really look at it when you don't have a direct sunlight beam going on it, it's bluish gray in nature. And so the exception is, of course, is when you bring in that extra light. And then that's when you get multiple colors. But most of the time, you call it a silver lining, you call it, just a bright light reflecting off of it. But I really love how he put this together and how he made it show up.
Yeah, and I think for Bierstadt, he was, for a lot of his large-scale landscapes in the Rockies, the picture gets more and more dramatic as you kind of recede in the picture plane. So as you get to that backdrop of mountains and clouds, he's really trying to heighten the sense of emotion and really capture what it might feel like to stand in that landscape. Because most of his viewers are, on the East Coast, they're never going to have a chance to travel to California. So seeing this large scale painting was the closest they'd ever come. So that was really his way of like trying to transport you to that location.
Yeah. And one thing I'll just add on that, I love how the slopes and the light and how he added that to. I'm looking at clouds primarily, but I'm looking also at pretty much the peace and tranquility across the valley, so to speak, and how that reflects into the storm itself. And I said, wow, this is so realistic, and this is to me giving someone who would be on the East Coast a real good. I don't want to say dramatization, but a very good, what word am I looking for, feel for what is actually occurring at that moment. And so yeah. I love this. I just think it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And for another piece from the late 19th century, I also want to take a look at a painting by Charles Weimar of Buffalo crossing the Prairie from 1859. And this is a little more subdued than the piece by Bierstadt, but shows a really lovely sunset with the clouds rolling in. And I was wondering, what do you think, what kind of weather is approaching them, or how does what kind of weather event does he seem to be capturing here?
To me, this is a perfect example. I don't want to say about Oklahoma sunsets. We get a lot of beautiful sunsets, and there's beautiful sunsets in different places in the world. Sunsets are kind of unique, and to capture the colors, it was about a month ago when we had those bumpy clouds, and a lot of people went outside and saw those. Those are mammatus clouds, and some people say mammatus, but they're also known as pillow clouds. But when the sun hits it just in a great manner, now there's two things going on. That was almost the most fantastic moment that you can ever have, because these mammatus clouds happen a lot during thunderstorms. Nobody really notices them. But when highlights are brought into it, all of a sudden it becomes something people say, I got so many pictures. I've never seen this in my life, and I've been here for 70 years. And it's like, no, you have seen it, but it just has never been highlighted. And one of the cool things about our sunsets, and to give our viewers an idea, as the sun is setting, it is also the sun's rays are cutting through a lot of our atmosphere. Like this time of year, the sun is like almost directly overhead. So there's no, it's a minimum amount of atmosphere that the sun rays are going through. That's why we get sunburned so quickly. But with the sun sets, sun rises, there's a lot of light that is coming in at a big angle. So it's cutting through a lot more of our atmosphere. Well, in our atmosphere, we have a lot of water, we have dust, we have particles, air pollution, stuff like that. But what that's doing is bending the light rays, and that is enhancing the colors that are showing up. So that also enhances the cloud and just the aurora that you see pretty much from the sun as it is setting in the west. And so what I think with this picture and what I see here is that what he has captured is this is not obviously a storm. This is not a plains storm and anything happening that's bad. This is literally the reflection of a beautiful sunset on I don't want to call it serene, but to me this is for the west. As you look at Buffalo coming across and getting some water after maybe a day of grazing, and getting a little bit of water before they settle down for the night. And then at the same time, it's kind of more of one of the more peaceful feelings that you get. And that to me is brought to life so much more in this painting, just by the mere fact that it is an association of the meteorological uniqueness of a sunset, how it reflects on the clouds, because how do you get the clouds to reflect, when it's on the bottom side? It's only because the sun is so low on the horizon, it's getting bent, and then it gets shot back up into the base of the clouds, and that's why we get those beautiful sunsets.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Yeah, and I think he really captures it. And Weimar is one of the few artists in the Gilcrease collection who had a chance to travel to the Great Plains in the mid-19th century when the bison still numbered in the millions. So instead of relying on, written accounts, he really had a chance to observe scenes like this firsthand. So this is really based on his personal experiences traveling across the Great Plains.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And as I look at the kind of the waters and the other thing here too, again, the reflection on the waters, which is obviously something that I have noted even here on my ranch. I love sunsets and reflections off of the water. And I think that he was able to grab, this again to give even more of a serene moment and peaceful look. And I mean, everybody sees that, but it's really when you see it and then you can kind of feel it from this painting, I think it makes a huge impact on what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, moving forward, I want to take a look at a couple paintings from the early 20th century. And in the Gilcrease collection in particular, we have some really interesting works by a couple of artists who were inspired by storms and even by weather-related disasters. And so first up, I wanted to take a look at Frederic Remington's painting, The Stampede from 1908. And this is perhaps one of the best known works from the Gilcrease collection. It shows a cowboy, riding his horse at a full-on gallop in the middle of a thunderstorm. You can see a bolt of lightning in the background, which has spooked the herd of cattle. So he's racing to rein these cattle back in the middle of a storm. And Remington, I think, was just really, his draftsmanship is really fantastic at capturing that diagonal sweep of the rain. But yeah, I wanted to ask about this weather event or what you think might be going on here from a meteorological standpoint.
Well, this is my favorite. This is one of my all-time favorites, obviously, because this is. I'll admit, and I kind of admitted at the beginning, I'm kind of a homer for thunderstorms. I don't like tornadoes. I hate tornadoes, in fact, and I can go into a long story about why I hate them. So many people come to Oklahoma to see them, and I don't want to leave Oklahoma. I just don't like the results of those. I think it's a unique thing of nature to see the storms build, the energy, the power. But what I think he grabbed here was just such a, I mean, obviously it's time stamped, for really the Old West and what's going on, but it's also the life of pretty much a cowboy and the life of a rancher. I mean, even today, this was me I had a four-wheeler instead of a horse, so I didn't have four legs, I had four wheels. So, but this was just a couple of days ago, but to me, it represents a way of life. It represents as well the toughness of what you have to have and what you have to be able to live on the land. And to me, this is one of those representations of like looking at how well how well this was done is so obvious. But the thunderstorm itself, the low-hanging clouds on the left side, very, very much alive in terms of how that thunderstorm would look. To the right, you'd have the heavy rain, the thunderstorm coming at you, the lightning strike, which again, cloud-to-ground lightning is so common in thunderstorms, as we know. But just the perils of what he had to go through in this type of environment, and how he's just soaked, and they're trying to catch the stampede and slow it down from probably the thunderstorm itself. And I love how it just kind of fades, how the cattle in the background kind of fade in the rain, kind of a rain fade, so to speak, that's going on. That just gives you the real feeling, at least for me, it's a real feeling of what's actually happening in real life. And I can just see this happening. And the action, and to me, this is not perfect, but it's about as close to perfect of capturing a moment that I could really envision if I was ever going to see something like this again, because this was reality, and this was what they had to deal with. And there all these things that are happening, the heavy rain, and I'm sure there was some hail mixed in there, and they're trying to stay alive because they don't want to be struck by lightning either. But and you can just see him and to me, just the rush and the hurrying, trying to calm things down while you're in the middle of chaos. And so I think this is just absolutely, you can tell I kind of got excited. I'm gonna slow down now. I'll let you take it.
Yeah. Well, and I think, for Remington, this was painted the year before his death, so toward the end of his career. And at that point, he was really taking a more symbolic look at the American West. And, Remington spent most of his career in New York. And so he had kind of a romanticized view of the West. While he traveled to the West, he never spent much time living west of the Mississippi. And I think what he was seeing in the early 20th century was certainly the end of that original cowboy era with, you know, those really long range drives, and so in this painting the storm is symbolic of a literal washing away of that cowboy lifestyle. And I kind of wish Remington could see the West today, because I'd want to tell him, like, cowboys didn't disappear. Like, you know, we still have ranches. Like, we still have, you know, it's modernized. It's a 21st century version, but that we still have, you know, this love of ranching. We still have cowboys here in Oklahoma. So, but I think it's really this. It's a symbol of this sort of changing of a way of life that he observed, or that he believed he was observing in the early 20th century.
Yeah, and I would agree, you know, from the standpoint of wide open, I would agree that, I mean, that was the end of an era of, you know, the wide open spaces, I guess you could call it. But I still, you know, I mean, to this day, and as I referenced just a little bit ago, it still plays, I mean, I am caught up in that still to this day, even though that's not me, you know, it still is a feeling of what is going on. And I wish he would have known that as well, because cowboys didn't die, you know, they didn't totally go away. They're still here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. And yeah, and next up, I wanted to take a quick look at one of our sketches by the painter William R. Leigh. And this is simply titled Threatening Clouds. It's from 1912. And the Gilcrease has over 1,000 artworks by William R. Leigh, including many of his oil sketches. And these are typically fairly small, about 8 by 10 inches. And a lot of these works like this piece were probably done on site. This wasn't something that he was traveling with his paint box. He was setting up in a landscape, painting outdoors, and he really loved the clouds. We have dozens of sketches by Leigh showing cloud shapes and really focusing on the sky. And so, yeah, I wanted to ask about the weather event that's happening in this piece by William R. Leigh.
I think that this is a representation of now these clouds are called cumulus congestus. And he took this, and this is right before they become what we call cumulonimbus. And so he took those, and I think gave me a really good feeling for what is actually occurring. And then you'll see the rain striations that are on the right side, and the rain curtain, as we call it. I was taken aback a little bit by just right in the lower center part. There is an area in which it shows some, like, he has some rain that's like has fallen. It's just on its last half of its fall. Do you see that in there?
Yeah.
Below the base of that cloud on the right. And what's interesting is in the arid west, and this is the only place where I would make, and it's not a negative comment, but I would make a comment that meteorologically, really we have more what we call virga, and a lot of folks would be familiar with virga. Virga is when the cloud is up high, and then it starts to rain, but it's so dry down at the surface that it evaporates, and then you lose sight of it because it evaporates and goes back up to the sky before it even comes to the ground. Right. So it feels like this is reverse of what it should. To me, if I was in this arid climate, the rain would be up higher and then evaporating as it was going down to the ground, whereas he has it down lower. Now that can happen because the storm can move off, and then the last of the rain. Sometimes you'll see this if you look in nature in a wide open space, if you ever get a chance to do it outside the trees that we have around Tulsa. But you'll see the thunderstorm going, and then you'll see kind of the rain following, because it takes a while for the rain to actually make it down to the Earth's surface. But this was one of those where I thought the environment he's in, that doesn't really match. But I take it for what it is, and I love the cloud formation. I love how he made these cumulus clouds. And also notice there's a flat base on these clouds. Now, I like what he did here because it's obvious that there's flat bases on clouds, but that is a certain temperature where water vapor, which is something we cannot see, gets cold enough that it turns to water droplets that we can see. So that's why there's a base on a cloud, is that's a certain temperature. And so that's when it's just like a pitcher of water ends up with water on the outside, or ice water ends up with water droplets on the outside. That's condensation. So that's what's going on here as well. And so that flat bottom is basically a certain temperature. And he made it fairly uniform, which is meteorologically correct. And so I love what was done there, and I think that that's pretty cool. And other than the virga thing, I'm really happy with that.
Yeah. Well, there's one more I wanted to take a look at that really shows perhaps more the impact of a series of weather events. and that's Alexander Hoag's Crucified Land from 1939. And this painting is part of Hoag's erosion series. He was looking at the impact of weather patterns in Texas and Oklahoma in the 1930s, in the era that we typically think of as the Dust Bowl. But the same plowing practices that led to the Dust Bowl also led to some massive erosion when people were plowing the lands in ways that really wasn't sustainable. So here he's showing, in the very background of the painting, you can see these like dark purple storm clouds rolling in. And most of the painting is really showing the effect of all this rain washing away the soil and really eroding down the farmland. But yeah, but I wanted to ask about, that weather event, or even if you had any insights into how weather really affected farming in Oklahoma in this era, in the 1930s.
This is probably, Laura, I am very familiar with this because my family went through this in Nebraska. And so my family is German origin, and they settled in the late 1800s in south central Nebraska. And so you had a bunch of different backgrounds from different places, a lot of Czech, a lot of German, a lot of French and all that. But everybody came out with the same idea: agriculture, grow your crops, live, flourish, because it's great soil and land. And nobody really took into consideration how cycles work and how things happen. And of course, during the 1930s from Oklahoma and Texas, the same story pretty much happened. Everybody said, hey, it's dirt, it's land, we can grow stuff. But nobody, as you just mentioned, nobody really had the means to really keep it under check or in check, so to speak. And therefore, there was so much barren soil. And then we all know what happens when it's 100 degrees outside for 2 months, 3 months, and no rain. It just disappeared. Everything disappears. Everything dries up. And if you already have barren soil, this is just exacerbates the problem. And that's what we watch for still to this day, of droughts forming. Like we have a drought right now in New Mexico and western Texas and western Oklahoma. We don't know if that's going to expand this year, but the agricultural methods and practices of today are obviously so much different than what was presented in this painting. And right after the 30s, we had a lot of rain, and there was barren soil and the ground. I love what he did here. And you see the tractor and the plow in the right side. And it was just, people did not have conservation in their mind. They had growing things in their mind. Nobody knew that would become a problem. And so I love what he did here, because this is reality. This was a reality check at that time, just showing how much land and soil we lost, how much topsoil blew away during the 30s, the dirty 30s, as we called it. And then also what happened right after that is rain started to come in on barren soil, and there was no grass to slow it down. There was nothing there, no vegetation. And it created these big erosional areas. And I mean, you got gullies all over. In fact, my dad just called me the other day. My parents did not have any rain for almost 6 months, or snow, and they ended up with 6 inches of rain in one day. And he's upset because they lost so much soil because nothing had grown during the spring, because they were in a drought. So this still is, representative of what can happen anytime.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great to keep in mind, or that it's not just a caution for the 30s, but also perhaps a bit of a cautionary tale for us today as well. And well, thank you so much. As we, I wanted to wrap up. I think you had a couple things you wanted to share, but first I just wanted to ask, for our visitors or our viewers today, do you have any tips or weather safety tips you'd like to share, especially as we're still in, Oklahoma's spring storm season now?
Okay. That's a good idea. And if you guys got a second, I'll just give you a quick update. I just was on TV last night. We've had about 32 tornadoes so far for the year. And so what does that mean? Well, that just means we're kind of about normal. But I showed a graphic last night that showed that all the tornadoes were pretty much from Joplin, Missouri to Tulsa down to the southwest corner of Oklahoma. There hasn't been any in northwestern Oklahoma. And so we're going into this lull for this next week or two, but don't let that lull you to sleep, because we still have threats of severe weather that will loom. And we try very hard not to make people scared, because I mean, the world's upside down anyway with the pandemic. And of course, then whatever's going on in Minneapolis or today. And I mean, there's so many things that are just, going back and forth. So our job, and as I've gotten older, I try to, throw away the scare tactics of what's going on and be more fundamentally correct on making sure people know what to do. We have so many avenues to get help. And one of the things that I love is that, with technology, someday it's going to replace some of us. with what we do. But I love what we can do, like with a phone app, like at Channel 6, where you punch in, you get the weather app, and then you just say, hey, I want to be notified if there's a tornado for me or for my parents or where my kids live. If they're at Stillwater or if they're in Norman, I can punch that up so I can kind of follow along with that. So I can just give them a call and say, hey, are you paying attention to the weather? And so what is so cool about that is how technology has changed our life. And so for anyone who's really worried, right now, Tulsa, and we talked about this before we started, we've been very fortunate up until last year. Last year was kind of like a wake-up call for us that we haven't had in quite a while, where that was close to having a massive tornado coming through Tulsa, and that was bad enough. But we're talking about, someday it's our calling, or I mean, I don't want to say our time, but we're going to have to put up with it sometimes statistically. It's been in Oklahoma City, it's been in Joplin, and we have to just be aware, pray it doesn't happen here, but someday it will, statistically. So you just have to make sure you have a safe place to go. I always think that if you have a safe place to go and you don't just go, whatever, Travis is just full of hot air again. Of course I am most of the time, but that's another story. But we try not to freak people out. We have so many storm trackers. We have helicopters. We try to let people make the judgment for themselves. Here it is. Here's what's going on. Here's where it's going. And then people can kind of make their own decisions on what they want to do and how they want to be safe. And, we'll have little kids even calling us in the middle of our severe weather thing and being scared. But we always say we're trying to get safe places for everybody. So I think number one is having a weather app so that you know when to, flip on the TV. You say, and you can flip on the TV because everybody's on social media and doing everything else. And there's a lot of good information on social media and there's a lot of bad information on social media. And it was just a couple years ago, it's 2015, we had a picture of a tornado coming in on the BOK, downtown Tulsa. And I was like, where did that come from? And it looked so real. And somebody had photoshopped it while we did have an actual tornado near Sand Springs. And they did that. I said, I did not see, where is it? And I was upset with our staff. I was like, why didn't we see this? Why? And I looked around and they said, I don't think it's real. And I said, how could it be real? We're right here. And it was Photoshopped, but I think the Weather Channel even showed it on TV. So there's still a lot of things with social media. And I know that was 5 years ago, but that's still, those things still pop up. So we want people to please be aware of that. Just have a safe place to go and make it so that your kids aren't scared. If you're scared, your kids are scared. We've psychologically figured that out. So we want to make sure that kids aren't scared and they're not too bold. They're just smart and respected. That's what we try to get kids to do. So that's that part. I do get a few emails. Can I read them to end here?
Absolutely. Yeah, we wanted to give you a chance to read out some of your favorite emails.
Okay. These are people who love me, not. You people stink so bad. Why couldn't you just let us watch what you just screwed up? There was no tornado. You are an idiot. So that was one of the nicest ones. These are emails that I received, by the way, from people after severe weather events or during severe weather events. Hey, we live in Coffeyville. We are an orphan to you during tornado season. Oh, yeah, you cover Tulsa, but hey, there are other people that live around here too. We had storms tonight, and you didn't even go on the air once. I bet if it even was a raindrop in Tulsa, you would have stayed on for an hour. Oh, okay.
Yep.
So, dear Travis, why did you spend 30 minutes talking about a storm that didn't change? Why do you report on storms that are so far away from Tulsa? Don't you know most people, places that you report on don't even get your channel? My family lives in Poto, Oklahoma. They don't watch you. You're stupid. They watch Arkansas. Why do you send people out in flooding rivers or in the path of a tornado to tell us not to go there? Why do you spend 30 minutes telling us it's raining when we can obviously look outside and figure that out for ourselves? Why do you tell ones in thunderstorms to stay away from electrical appliances, but then tell them to keep watching Channel 6? And last but not least here, I have a whole bunch, but I'll just grab four. Travis, did your mom not hug you enough when you were a kid? You are an attention freak, a prima donna. You spent 27 minutes tonight saying the same thing over and over and over. You showed pictures of Bartlesville in the dark. They were so bad, nobody even knew where they were. Do you think people were actually sitting there watching you in Bartlesville with death and destruction only minutes away? No, they'd already hauled their rear to a place of safety, and I bet they didn't take their stupid TV set with them. Say what you have to say, then shut the heck up. You do this crap all the time, anytime there's a dark cloud or a breeze messes up your hair. What hair you have left? Get some help, man. Find the Lord. Go collect stamps. For God's sake, please quit being a camera freak. So there you go. That's just a small sampling of what I get the opportunity to respond to during severe weather. So
Well,
for people who want to know what goes on behind the scenes, there you go.
thank you very much for sharing a little bit of insight into some of your correspondence, and of course we very much appreciate you helping keep Tulsa safe and the surrounding community with all of your efforts. And thank you so much for coming on today and taking a close look at some of these artworks. We really appreciate it, and yeah, maybe hope to do this again sometime.
All right,
thanks. Yep, we'll watch for you on the news.
All right.
Thanks.